The End Zone, presented by TiVo, rolls on as we head into Week 8 here in New York. Iron Eagle, I'm Jason Horwitz. Glad to be with you on CBSSports.com and on your TiVo DVR via TiVocast. Each and every week bringing you the top 5 stories, and I am this week glad to be joined by Jim Nantz, who will be seeing the Indianapolis Colts this weekend down in Carolina. And, it's a weekend that, a lot of people are kind of overlooking the matchups this weekend. Everybody's been giving credit to the Patriots. We want to talk about the Indianapolis Colts, and we bring in Jim Nantz to do that. And Jim, the thing that strikes me is last year, you've been following the Colts year in, year out, and watching this development. Last year, they got over that Patriots hump, won the Super Bowl, and then you come back this year, and it seems like they didn't even beat the Patriots. No one's even talking about Indianapolis.
Well, how can you not be blown away by what New England's been doing to this point in the season? And it all works out so favorably for Indianapolis. I mean, you win the Super Bowl, you come back, you're undefeated, and you're still not the talk of the league. So, they play with that chip on their shoulder. It's always worth a little something. And, if the Colts can get by Carolina this weekend and New England, as we expect, to take care of Washington, then we've got this monster game, unlike anything we've seen in some time in November in a regular season.
I think there's a feeling out there, Jim, from some that the Colts are offended by this, that the Patriots are getting all the headlines. But in my mind, Indianapolis is such a true extension of their head coach, Tony Dungy. The fact that his quiet demeanor does not overcompensate for his quiet confidence. And I think this team is so businesslike that they're willing to accept the backseat for now, just as long as nobody's talking about them in those terms come late January.
I think you're right. I think everything about that franchise, when you walk onto the Indianapolis complex and you even just meeting with people that are working in the cafeteria there, I think that everybody kind of carries with them that they exude that kind of quiet confidence that comes right from the head coach. And, I don't think Tony's a guy that's losing any sleep at all over the fact that New England's getting all this attention, and he probably very quietly kind of enjoys it all. But, he's not a peaks and valley kind of a guy. He's just so even-keeled. He's going to go about his business. I'm sure he hasn't, we're all already here. We are talking about next week, the November 4th gigantic game that could potentially be out there with 2 unbeatens. And I'm sure Tony's barely given it a thought.
It's funny you mentioned the business-like atmosphere of the cafeteria. That's what happens when you give the head chef a Super Bowl ring.
Yeah, they did, and they not only gave the chef and everybody else who works in the cafeteria, they gave everybody right down to the janitor in the building. They flew them down to the Super Bowl, which was that was a Jim Irsay thing, which he deserves a lot of credit for that. And when I was in Indianapolis a few weeks back for the Denver Colts game, we happened to be invited to go in and have a bite to eat. And I've been there so many times that I know some of that personnel. And I asked the guy that I perceived to maybe be the lowest man on the totem pole inside the building. And I went over and said, "Hey, I just got to ask you something. What was it like being at the Super Bowl? Did you go?" And he waxed on about how much that meant to him. It's not that I didn't believe the story. I just wanted to hear it. I just wanted to hear somebody talk about what it meant to him. It was very special. They chartered 3 767s out of Indianapolis, and everybody in that building was allowed to bring one guest. I've never heard that before.
No, very classy move.
It's
very
a
classy
fantastic
move.
organization. Jim, the one thing that sticks out to me about this year's Colts team is the fact that, everyone, obviously they'll talk about Peyton Manning and the offense and the business-like way that they go down the field, but the defense this year, 3rd best total defense in the entire NFL. That gets overlooked week in and week out.
Well, Jason, what shocks you is when you start putting your boards together and you start getting prepared going into the week and just committing the names and the numbers, which, by the way, we've seen this team enough times now. I think we could roll out of bed and pretty much identify every member of the Colts. But you start looking at the experience or lack of experience on that Colts defense, and it's a pretty amazing achievement what they've done, how they have turned over that roster, if you will. Sure, you've got Dwight Freeney there. Morris is out. Rob Morris is out. But, he was one of the older guys on that defense. He's IR'd. But you start looking at the ingredients of a secondary. Bob Sanders is like now a senior spokesman for that group. in year 4. I mean, they got first and second year guys who just have come in. They've been taught the system. They've bought into it, and I mean, they're just flying all over the field. And I really thought that, and I think everybody else did too, that Bob Sanders was the key to them winning that thing last year anyway. Without him, it was a disaster. They couldn't stop anybody on the run. And then once he was able to come on board just before the playoffs, it was a total transformation. And that has carried on over into this regular season.
And, Jim, as we wrap it up here, I think the amazing part of this little chat that we've just had is we've gone 5 minutes plus about the Indianapolis Colts, and we haven't mentioned Peyton Manning. And to me, that might be the best sign of all, that this team is more than just Peyton Manning. They are a true team now. They have their championship under their belt, and in my mind, Manning's the type of guy that looks for multiple titles. He's not a one Super Bowl kind of QB.
I don't think so either, and I think that the best time for him to go out and win a second Super Bowl is to back up the first one immediately. Yeah. And it, as much as we talk about how interesting it is to see the dynamics of the Colts kind of be an afterthought with what New England has done here at the start of this season, it's also interesting how Peyton sits back and you don't hear much from him. Tom's going to obviously, Brady's going to, staying healthy, he's going to shatter his single-season touchdown pass mark. But I know Peyton well enough to know that doesn't concern him too much either. So it's an exciting time in the NFL. It's particularly exciting for us, being the AFC Network, to have these two teams. And if they can get by this week, which I expect they both will, we'll be looking at next week a game that will be, in my mind, a playoff game because they will be playing for the home field when they meet that other team again in the AFC Championship.
And, of course, that'll be the game at the AFC Championship that determines who goes on to the Super Bowl. And you said Peyton Manning doesn't necessarily care about the record. That's the game that he'll care about. Jim, thank you very much for joining us on the End Zone presented by TiVo. Have a safe trip to Carolina, and I bet we'll be talking to you again next week if both those teams, the Patriots and the Colts, go undefeated.
Well, I'll look forward to it. Good to visit with both of you.
All the best, Jim.
Thanks, guys.
All right, folks, the End Zone presented by TiVo rolls on as we continue, always on demand on CBSSports.com and on your TiVo DVR via TiVo Cast. Plenty more coming up.